Hi everyone, only entrepreneurship. The series continues, and this is the 12th episode.
Yes.
With me is Shubhankar,
I.
and today we are again going to be continuing talking about the case studies. The last three case studies, one pertained to my own company and me as a person. So, where we saw the mix of personal life and the business.
Yeah.
There was this next case study where we had this guy who had all the money and lot of dream to earn more with absolutely zero knowledge and zero control. The next two case studies that we did in the last one was those technical guys, brilliant, who had excellent equipment, but then and lot of funding, but zero knowledge when it came to any of the things how to run the company.
Yeah.
And that next company, which was doing very fine as far as revenues were concerned, but it was that just one man company. He had all the dreams to expand and do everything. And all of these cases had only one thing, like I always have told you, in common, that each of these people thought that they knew everything, they don't require anyone's help, they know every process, and they also wanted to expand, they wanted to sell, and they failed in one big aspect of thinking. If you structure your thinking correctly, like I always say, whether it is your personal life or your professional life, and never separate them out because they have influence on each other. So, why should your thinking be separate for this and separate for that? So, in this particular episode and the next one, which I said, which is going to be Shubhankar heavy, he's going to be, he has been with me and doing all these things about thinking and practically running the company from the last 3 years and learning. He also has been applying this to his personal life, which was quite complicated for his age, his experience, and then he started applying the same principles over there. So, over to Shubhankar. I'll be here basically interjecting if there is anything, otherwise, it's his show. All yours, Shubhankar.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. So, yeah, the purpose of laying it out in such a way is for the last three episodes, we've been talking about professional stuff and how everything we've said about thinking applies there. But it's also important for everyone to understand how it affects your personal life as well. Something that I started realizing maybe over the last 6 months, maybe a year, is that once you start thinking this way just for your professional career or just for the work you do, it spills over into your personal life as well because it effectively is a part of your thinking. So you can't just help but you can't separate out the way you think for your work and the way you think in your day-to-day life. So it all gets intermingled and for the better because it just makes your thinking much more structured, and that's what I realized slowly started happening to me, which I was happy about because like we've referenced in the last few videos couple of times that there was this point where sir said you've just done 10% of the job, 90% still remains, and I had already 2 years of work over here. So yeah, that's it. So let me start off by telling you about what the thing was. So last year, exactly around this time actually, Colonel Pandey and I started discussing about what I was going to do at the end of my 3 years. Because when I joined the company, the first thing that was told to me was, look, we don't know if you're going to survive till the end of this year. But if you do, uh, I will promise you 3 years under in which I will teach you everything you need to know about being an entrepreneur. At the end of those 3 years, you are free to leave, you are free to start your own company. You want to continue here, you're free to do that. You want to go and do another job, you're basically free to do whatever you want to do. But if you want to learn entrepreneurship, spend these 3 years with me. So that's what was decided. So around this time last year, we started talking about, we're already two thirds of the way in. So what are you going to do next year? And I had absolutely zero clue. I'd never really thought much about it. I was just basically so engrossed in the day to day and learning that it was something that just simply never crossed my mind. So we started discussing various things, and one of the things that came up was possibly going abroad and pursuing a degree and then just seeing if that would suit, and then settling abroad, getting a job over there, and then how life unfolds. So that was one thing that we started talking about very actively, and we started discussing. This entire thing that I'm going to recap is basically going to be a case study on how macro to micro thinking really helps you in your day to day life. So, the first question, and I was really enthused by the idea because I never really thought much about it, but I did like the idea of going to a new country, going to a different culture, meeting new types of people, and settling in a place where the standard of living is going to be much different than what it is over here. So all of these things combined proved to be quite interesting to me. So we started discussing where to go because I never really thought much about it or what degree to pursue. These were again things that I'd never really given much thought to. So it started off with, what are your ambitions for your life? What's the macro for your life? And the only thing I could think of was that I want to be an entrepreneur. So regardless of where I go, I don't want to let go of that. So okay, that's when I started thinking of what countries can I go to that are that bet very heavily on entrepreneurship, that have a lot of entrepreneurial talent, have a lot of startups. So I started auditing all of the countries across the world. I started looking at the kind of universities that they have. I started looking at the kind of degrees that they offer. I started looking at various routes to immigration and visas and everything that I could think of that I would have to answer when I have to go abroad. So all of these things combined pointed me to a couple of different countries. So that's how I
Before
started.
that, there are a lot of things happened before that. One of the major things that Shubhankar was undergoing at that time was a tremendous mental dilemma. First, he had a resistance when he came in that he has
Yeah.
no desire to study.
And that was something that I maintained even then.
Even that he didn't want to.
That I yeah I mean I just was very extreme in my views. I guess that if I want to be an entrepreneur, there's not really a course that can teach me as much about entrepreneurship as much as I can learn on the job.
And he was absolutely rigid. I So the first major obstacle was, even for me, was to, if I can even make him think of pursuing studies abroad,
Yeah.
so I should be successful. So that was the basic thing. And that was not the only thing. His desire to become an entrepreneur was so strong that he was completely confused whether he wants to become an entrepreneur or does he want to actually go abroad to study.
Yes.
So when he goes to study, what happens to entrepreneurship? If he becomes an entrepreneur, what happens to studies? As if this was not sufficient, he has a lovely friend,
Yeah. We can call her my girlfriend. That's
his
fine.
girlfriend, from many years, who at that point in time was hell bent not to leave India. So this brings another aspect. So does he become an entrepreneur? Does he go abroad? What happens to his girlfriend? Do they get married or not? She is pursuing her own career. She was his classmate. She was also in a MNC. She quit for some MBA. And at that point in time, all these things were happening in Shubhankar's head. And he was so confused that he actually had absolutely no idea of what he wanted to do. And I, like an extremely good teacher, every time I would I see a problem. So I would only tell him that, did you consider this? Did you consider this? And I would always insert one more doubt in his mind, one more doubt, one more aspect to be considered. So by this all started in August, and by September he was in a completely mental mess of 5 6 things that he wanted to do. Out of which studies was one.
Yeah. So The reason I had not really covered that part yet was because I wanted to just underline the confusion that I was undergoing, where even though we've been talking about thinking from macro to micro, my first instinct was to go towards the micro, which was what colleges do I go to, what countries do I look for, what courses do I think about. It was only towards the end of that month, I would say August end, that once I started discussing with Colonel Pandey, that I realized that though there are a lot of more higher level issues that I must think of first. Uh, I have been in a relationship with someone for the better part of almost 6-7 years now, and so the first question that popped up was, what happens to her? How do we maintain this? If I end up going abroad, how do we end up together? Because definitely one doesn't go abroad to study to just come back. At least that's not the plan initially. You always think that you're going to go there and you're going to settle down. So that was one of the major things. The other thing in my mind was that if I go abroad, then am I somehow somewhere losing out on my desire to be an entrepreneur? Because like the kind of freedom that I have working here with Karan Pandey, the kind of freedom that I would have starting a company in India would definitely be much lesser in a third country. So all of these things started causing a lot of confusion in my mind. And like any young person, I'm sure there are so many people who have faced the same issue earlier and are facing the same issue today. And I know that because there are a couple of friends who've actually talked to me about this. Uh, but it just caused a huge mental stress on me, that how do I solve this
And there
entire
was no
problem?
one to fall back on. He could not even fall back on me because discussions with me were very simple.
Yeah.
So there was no solution, there was no discussion. Your problems, you sort it out. I have taught you thinking,
Yeah.
so you think. And I think the best contribution I would always do in these discussions was give him one more parameter which he had not considered.
Yeah.
So that would only make his life miserable.
Yeah.
So I would enjoy, I would say, okay, fine, I have taught you. So you think now, you sort out
Yeah.
this massive maze, you got to sort out.
Basically, the initial discussions that we had, they posed more problems than solutions for me. The first thing that I started then thinking of was, okay, forget this entire thing of going abroad, or forget this entire thing of doing a course. What's the macro for me? What's my macro for life? For me, I would say that the macro is the relationship that I am in, and prioritizing that over everything else. So today, if I were to say that I have the option of going abroad, but I would have to leave her.
There was a time entrepreneurship was number one.
Yeah,
Fancy was number two.
yeah. So that actually will edit this part out. I don't want to get into
Yeah,
too
I
much
know, I
trouble. Yeah. So, but this happened that he asked me, "What do you prioritize? What are the things that you will prioritize the most?" So I said entrepreneurship number one, my girlfriend number two, and then everything else comes at number three. But then once we actually started doing more of questions and answers like he always does with me, I realized that entrepreneurship actually is location independent. It doesn't really matter. But even if I were in a successful company running it by myself, there is no guarantee that I would be happy for the rest of my life. But if I were in any job, but if I had, my personal life sorted, if I was still with, if I managed to stick it out with my girlfriend, I knew that I would be happy, that I would not be dissatisfied with how my life was going. And of course, there's an argument to be made that professional life, you need happiness in both professional and personal, but it doesn't necessarily have to be at the cost of one another. And that's when I really understood that prioritizing of my personal life, of the relationship that I am in, would be the most important thing. And that was the unlock, I would say, towards the rest of the things,
Absolutely.
towards sorting out everything. So once I put my girlfriend at number one, I realized that everything else flows so logically. So how did it flow? I said, fine. I need to be happy till for the next 70 years. For that I need to be with her. And so what happens next? Let me not get too attached to the idea of entrepreneurship. Let me not get too attached to the idea of uh, studying abroad or doing a degree. My simple thing was that
At the same time, not leave it.
at the same time, not leave it, of course. My simple thing was, let's talk. So I had a conversation with her. She turned out to be surprisingly open to the idea of relocating abroad once, if I were to go abroad and settle down there. She was extremely open to the idea, and that was one thing that really sorted things out. After that, we simply started discussing more and more details of how it would work. So, fine. Today, this was August or September last year. So from there till the next 1 year, I was actually supposed to go this year, but then because of COVID, we ended up deferring for a year. I got admitted as well to a few colleges in UK, but I ended up deferring, and I plan to go next year now in 2022. But anyway, for the sake of our case study, back then in 2020 August, the discussion was that in 2021 August, I would be leaving and I would be going to study. A year from then, I would be graduating, and then I would be probably, if I were lucky enough, I would be getting into a job and then starting that.
There was a phase of almost about 1 month, that is September 2020.
Yeah.
This particular 1 month is actually very important. That's a time the transition took place from uh, handling the entire problem all over by himself to open discussion,
Yeah.
where after having put him under tremendous amount of mental stress, his personal mental stress, which he was sorting out all by himself. So finally, when I found that yes, he had not only covered considerable distance, probably he was almost 90% there. And that is a time, probably as an elder, as a mature person, as a senior person, then probably I thought that this now topic has to become an open topic between us and talk.
Yeah.
And in September 2020, towards the end, October, this topic became completely open between us, and where it was not that he could not ask me anymore, but probably anything that could have troubled him, he had considered. If he had not considered, I had already put that in his mind. I think those 2 3 months must have been one of the worst ones, where he actually had to sort out his. And mind you, while all this was going on, the company work did not stop. He was continuing with that. I did not relieve him anything. In fact, I would put more responsibilities on him so that I bring him under more pressure. So, probably that was the most stressful period that he has undergone, where he knew that his decisions are going to actually be writing his own fate.
Yeah, and it was actually around that period that I started thinking of my life in a very wide horizon. So thinking for the next 70 years. Who does that when they're 25? No one really thinks beyond the next 5 months, really, or the next year. Who they'll work with, what kind of company they'll go to, and what they'll be doing, right? But the only thing that it really opened my eyes up to was that you, regardless of what age you are at, need to start thinking of your life till the day you die. And once you develop that macro perspective and start dialing back towards your next 10 years, next 5 years, coming back to your next 1 year, coming back to your next 6 months, putting everything on a timeline, life becomes so easy. And that's what I did. So once the macro of my life was sorted out, I, yeah, is there something you want to say, sir?
Yeah, no, you're more or less you have covered this entire case study now, because now you actually are going towards the next case study. I want you to make a distinction of whatever you have spoken today. I just want to sum up certain things out of that. The oscillation I always talk of, that the ability to go forward 10 years and 7 years and 70 years and 12 years, and to come back to reality today, to real time today, that ability to go forward, come back, think 7 years ahead, 5 years ahead, keep all the factors which you cannot change, Your course will start on a particular day, it will end on a particular day, your visa will start on a day, end in a day. Your girlfriend will finish her college, will finish a job on a day. So there are so many things that he had to do, which today, when he talks in this particular case study, so this oscillation of macro to micro, sequential to simultaneity of all the events that were going on in the mind, the finally everything came down and generally settled to last October, which I always say identification of a problem is a 90% of solution itself. 10% thereafter is just a matter of detail. And that's what you got in thereafter once you're very clear in your life as to how exactly will I proceed. The best part is Shubhankar is not going to lose anything. He gets everything that he wanted.
Yeah, and that's what putting everything on a timeline really helped with, because after our initial discussions with my girlfriend, we simply had a few more discussions on our individual timelines and where she's going to be, where I'm going to be, and what we realized was that for the next 2 years there's just no overlap. She's doing her MBA, I may be going abroad and then starting a new job over there, and so once we knew where we were and where at what point would we be likely to converge was when our entire mental stress got sorted out, and we could really very easily put the pieces of the jigsaw together.
Yeah, absolutely. And this all has happened because not only has he learned that art of thinking, how exactly to think, what to think, and how do you compartmentalize your thinking, how do you interrelate things, and all this in a very methodical manner. Not only has he been taught, he actually has undergone everything,
Yeah.
which he just extended to his life.
There's also a very small example that I would like to end with. It probably extend the video by a few minutes, but I think it's worth it. So this is another way that I found that using macro to micro really helps, and it just comes very naturally to you. So a friend of mine really recently came up to me and told me that she's applying to a couple of different companies, different varied profiles that she wants to apply for, and then but not really sure of how to start working on a CV. The idea I gave her was something that really helped her, and that I think might help you guys if you're in a similar spot. The only thing I told her was that, look, start thinking, look, what's the most macro point? The most macro point is who is the person who's going to receive your document, your CV. Is going to be some HR executive or some senior management in that company. Let's think from their perspective. What other things that they look for? I asked her to look at different job listings for the same kind of positions across the industry. I asked her to collate all of that into a document. I asked her to look at specific keywords that she would find being repeated in terms of what are the expectations from a person in that position. I asked her to classify all of those into different buckets, and then I asked her to reverse engineer her in her own CV into something that would be pleasing to the eye, that would really talk to a person in that company, and they would understand completely that yes, this is the person that with these kind of skill sets that I'm looking for. And of course, there's no lying involved. It's
Exactly the point. There is no lying. All he has done to help her is actually for her to think back on her life, her experience to see if she has done that.
The worst part is that most CVs, even though you've done the work, it's simply a matter of presenting it, and most people aren't able to present the work in a manner that is going to help the
Exactly.
recruiter make their decision. So in this case, the most macro point was who is the person who's receiving it, how are they going to look at your document, and then logically keeping on asking yourself a question: how do I get to the next step? How do I get to the next step? And the last step of your entire process is forming the CV, which is a simple 10-minute job if you've done this entire chain of thinking and this entire chain of work. So, two very clear examples on how thinking macro to micro helped us. This has been one of our longest videos, I think, but I think it's worth it. In the next video, we're going to be talking about what are we going to be talking about?
Yeah, we'll talk about the case study or we'll sum up the entire cases.
I no, I think there are a couple more stories that we can tell, cases that we can tell that will elaborate on sequential and simultaneous thinking
Yeah,
much
so
much more.
we'll just think over it, and very shortly we'll be back again and great having all of you with us. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye bye.